tragedy of Flight 401. On December 29, 1972, during the night, Eastern Airlines Flight 401, a L-1011 TriStar aircraft, was approaching the airport in Florida after departing from New York. The plane was new, and at the time, it was one of the most modern and automated aircraft in operation. The crew consisted of the experienced 55-year-old Captain Robert Loft, 38-year-old First Officer Albert John Stockstill, and 51-year-old Flight Engineer Don Rapo. All crew members were in good spirits as the flight had been smooth and uneventful, and they were preparing for landing at Florida's airport. Captain Loft gave the command to release the landing gear, and First Officer Stockstill input the corresponding command into the onboard computer. However, after a while, Stockstill noticed two illuminated indicators on the instrument panel showing that the side gear was deployed, but the indicator for the front gear did not light up. This indicated that the front landing gear had not been properly locked, and landing the plane could have caused serious damage if the aircraft touched down on the nose, potentially leading to a fire or other severe damage. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the pilots began discussing the problem. They needed to determine whether the issue was with the indicator light, which would indicate that the gear was safely deployed and the plane could land, or if there was a real mechanical issue with the front landing gear, which could mean an emergency situation. However, checking this in the dark was difficult. To buy some time, Captain Loft requested permission from the air traffic controller to fly in a holding pattern. The controller agreed, providing a new course for the aircraft, maintaining an altitude of 2,000 feet, 600 meters, and allowing the plane to continue flying in a circle. Loft confirmed the instructions and handed control to the autopilot so that the plane would follow the given route while the crew focused on solving the landing gear issue. Captain Loft, First Officer Stockstill, and Flight Engineer Repo repeatedly tried to remove and reinsert the light bulb into the instrument panel, but the result remained the same. One light was on and the other was not. Then, the flight engineer descended into the maintenance compartment to take a look through a small window at the front landing gear. However, through the window, all he could see was the dark night, and nothing was distinguishable. Loft, sighing in frustration, remarked, "We're having all this trouble over a light bulb." At that moment, the autopilot disengaged. This happened because, during their manipulations with the light bulb, the pilot accidentally bumped the control yoke, causing the autopilot to turn off. The plane began to descend, and the crew did not notice because it was a dark night. There were no stars or moon visible, and the airport lights were far off. The entire focus of the crew was on the light bulb issue, so they didn't realize the plane was slowly descending. Only a few minutes later, when First Officer Stockstill noticed unusual readings on the altimeter, he asked, "Are we still at 2,000 feet?" At that moment, the crew realized the plane was much lower, and they saw that they were just minutes away from the airport. In an instant, the plane crashed into a swamp, about 30 kilometers from the airport. The crash resulted in the deaths of 9 people, including the entire crew: Captain Robert Loft, First Officer Albert Stockstill, and Flight Engineer Don Rapo. 77 people survived. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, concluded that the primary cause of the crash was human error. The crew became overly focused on a minor issue with the light bulb and failed to pay attention to the aircraft's control, relying on the autopilot. After a thorough investigation, it was determined that all of the landing gear was indeed properly deployed, and the issue was merely a burned-out light bulb costing just $12. If the crew had known this, they could have safely landed the plane in Florida and saved 99 lives. The mystical consequences of Flight 401. After the crash, Eastern Airlines decided to use parts from the wrecked plane on other planes in their fleet, including the L-1011 TriStar model. One of the most talked about planes became TriStar 318, on which many parts from Flight 401 were installed. This plane in particular became associated with the most supernatural events. crew members started noticing unusual occurrences on other TriStar aircraft. Flight attendants and pilots reported feeling strange cold air and moisture in the cabin, as well as seeing hazy figures that would appear and disappear. Some flight attendants even reported seeing the ghosts of deceased crew members, Don Repo and Robert Loft. Later, even pilots began to report strange phenomena. On some occasions, voices resembling those of the dead colleagues would appear through the communication system in the cabin. Sometimes these spirits seemed to help save planes. For instance, during one flight, when a technical malfunction occurred, a flight engineer saw a figure in the airline's uniform quickly solving the problem, only to vanish shortly afterward. Later, it was discovered that this figure was Don Repo, whose parts from the wrecked plane had been used in the repairs of other aircraft. Eventually, the company decided that these supernatural phenomena needed to be addressed. In 1974, they removed all parts from the TriStar aircraft, and soon after, the anomalous events ceased. Thank you for watching this story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any new creepy legends and mystical tales. There's a lot more to come, so stay tuned and be ready for more encounters with the unknown. Look out for the next story.